Kia ora and welcome. You're at the Third Eye Sound Design Implementation. I'm very aware that's a terrible name. The pun doesn't work. It was very late when I submitted this, but you read it and it still came. So everything that happens next is on you. I'm James Dean. Forget that photo as well. I'm the entire audio team on Wanderer, sound design, dialogue, tools, or at least designing them, and music. But today I'm going to be talking about implementation. So a little bit about me. I'm James Dean. I've done 10 years in audio post. That's kind of the route that I did. I'll talk a bit more about that soon. I play all kinds of music for ages and ages. I switched to game audio full-time in 2019, forming Arco Audio, my own little company, focusing solely on game audio. I've worked on games like Wanderer, Icarus, Before We Leave, and various other ones. So coming from post-production, I had a specific framing of game audio, I suppose. And how I got there was I studied audio engineering at Mains. I got an internship. I left a full-time job to be at Mains, so every time there was something come up, I'd be like, I'll do it. I'll mix 40 Rock Quest songs. Yes, I love that. And that meant when an internship came up, the tutor was like, I know you're going to turn up, you're going to smile, and you're going to be on time. So I was lucky enough to get an internship at a post-production house. They had a big zombie film, needed a lot of Foley. They got us didn't know what the heck we were doing, guys, into a studio with a whole bunch of props, and we made a bunch of noises to sound cues on screen for a 2-hour-long movie. And that was, I think they used maybe 10% of what we did because we were just bumbling around. But all of a sudden I was like, man, I like making sounds for things. So I stayed there for a while. They gave me a job and they let me do the bookings, and then they let me do the IVR prompts. You may not know what that name is, but you've definitely experienced them. That's when you call the bank and they say, welcome to Spark. Press 1 if you would like to talk to somebody who's not going to help. That kind of stuff. So Spark changed from Telecom when I first started. That's how long ago it was. And we had to redo the whole library, which was 20,000 lines. It was weeks and weeks and weeks of recording and months of editing. So it really got me good at editing quickly by looking at waveforms and going, that's a breath, that's the end of the word, here's about how long this sentence looks like, cut, play, cool. Do that every day for hours and hours and hours. Then they let me touch film and television, which was cool, a bit more creative stuff in that. And then I moved on to advertising because there's not a lot of film in New Zealand, and potentially big companies that give you money to make sounds is a bit more money in it, so I ended up going that way, and then I had my soul thoroughly destroyed, and I was like, I want to do something that I love again, and that's how I ended up heading towards games. So I'm going to be talking mostly about this guy. When I was working still in advertising, I saw this amazing clip come up of somebody time travel, and they saw a Wright Brothers plane fly overhead, and it was in VR, and I was like, hell yes, this is what I want to do. It's got time travel, it's VR, which was like really at the front of things, immersion that you could do at the time. And I did that dirty thing where I found the person who was making it, and I called them up and said, who's doing your audio? And they were like, well, we're not funded right now, so we're just kind of playing around. And I'm like, that's cool. I don't know how to do game audio. I know how to do sound design and stuff, and I can bring all that experience on board. I've been doing it for 8 years at that point. But I don't know how it works. If you let me make some sounds and learn some stuff, you guys can have some sounds. And they were like, cool. And so eventually what happened was they took that over and pitched it to some people, and then I got a call saying, hey, do you want to come make a game with us for a year? And I was like, yes, I would love to do that. So I jumped over, fully in, bumbling my way through it. There weren't a lot of people around that were doing this kind of thing and were willing to talk about how to do interactive audio and how that works and stuff. So kind of had to do lots of YouTubing and just lots of playing around and seeing what worked. So coming from post-production, we have this thing called picture lock, where the pictures come in and everything stays the same. You know from that point on that none of the shots are going to change around, the director can't pull anything out, and you can start really honing in and putting in your sounds. Before then, you kind of have to place them around about, get a good vibe going, and know that you're going to have to re-edit it down. You have fixed sound design assets, the same sound plays at the same point every time. You know what you're dealing with. You've got a fixed sound mix. I know when the dialogue's going to happen, I know when the music's going to happen, I know when the sound effects are going to happen, and I can adjust those levels to make it feel good and not cover each other up. Video games. Dynamic visuals, it's different every time. Even if the player does the same thing, systemic world stuff changes. Like, you can't guarantee it's going to be the same. Dynamic sound design, a sound cue will have so many different variables, or can, that your sound's going to have to be different depending on how hard a surface is, how hard it hit, all those kinds of things. And you've got a dynamic mix. You never know. You've got an idea of when things are going to play, but you need to move things out of the way to have the most important sound coming through. Cool. So the process in post-production is create sound design assets, time them up to the visuals where they need to go, process the sound effects, give them some EQ, give them a bit of reverb so they feel like they're in the scene, they feel like they're behind a wall, they feel like they're behind a pillar, all those, process them. Mix the audio levels, make sure that the most important thing is popping out. In video games, it's a bit different. We create a whole sound effects library for a game, and pop that in. Then we start teaching the game how to do the post-production job. We teach it when to play a sound, how to choose the sound effect, how to process it and make it sound like it's in the space, and how to mix the audio levels and tell it which things are important. It's this whole process of taking this thing that I used to do and then condensing it into a passable language that a program can understand. Which has been a great reflection point because I kind of just do that stuff naturally, but now I'm asking these questions, why? Why do I do this, and how? And how can I create a thing that does the same thing that I would do in that situation? So I'm going to talk about a couple of the things that we attacked in Wanderer. So Wanderer is a VR time travel game. You use environmental interactions and time travel mechanics to solve puzzles to progress through a narrative. That's kind of the idea. But we've got these things, motion controllers. Now, if you've ever played VR, motion controllers are this amazing ability for you to go and pick a thing up with your hand and move it around, which is so cool. But then I realized this thing. So here's a curtain in film. I would know how fast it's going to open. I would know how long it's going to take. I would know, hey, it hits the end pretty loud. Let's have a clunk when it hits the end. It's opening. That's different to closing. You know, the resonance of the bar goes, you know, there's a difference between those things. I have all the information in front of me. I can choose the right sound. I can put it in. How do I tell the game all that information and get it to do it for me? So then I started thinking about things. How fast is the person moving those rails? Because they can open it and close it. They can open it halfway and close it halfway. And so I had to start thinking, how can I put all the right sounds in the hands of the system and make sure that it works? So I started thinking about things like, I'll have a slow loop that plays, that loops in the background. I'll have a fast for the curtain rail sounds. I could potentially put on a filter so that the top's going to go shink and shunk as it opens and closes, depending on which way it's opening. How hard does it hit the end? How fast is it going when it gets to the extremities? If it's past the thing, I'll get a clunk. And I started thinking about all these things and getting a lot of anxiety about how often I'm going to have to do this in this game. But what happened was we got to vertical slice, and while I'd been mulling this stuff over in the shower and not sleeping very well, something happened, which was, so the curtain is quite important. You open it up and you see this overrun city. It's quite a big moment, but thank goodness somebody else was having issues with opening the curtains and the light coming in, and that dynamic change was proving a bit of a problem on PlayStation 4. So what they ended up doing was saying, hey, the curtains for vertical slice have to open at this speed, and they're never closable again. And I was like, thank you, that's a whole bunch of things that I don't have to do all of a sudden, I'll take it. But I had started thinking about these problems because I'm going to get them at some point. So I'm going to start with a real easy one, footsteps. Everyone knows what footsteps are. Lots of games have footsteps. How amazing is our art team? These shoes look great. So thinking about that interaction, what information do I need to tell the system? Is it a walk, is it a run, or a scuff? On each of the animations, on the footsteps, our lovely art team went through and tagged and said, this is a scuff, this is a walk, this is a run. Then we check which character is using the animation. What shoe are they wearing? Big data table containing everyone's shoes. And then which surface is the footstep on? And then choosing again the right sound for the shoe type and the surface type. And the player as well used the same system, except I jimmied this thing together, every horizontal movement of a certain amount, play a footstep sound, check what the ground surface type is. and then based on which character you're playing, in Wanderer you play lots of different characters, change the shoe. Pretty straightforward, but again, it's using that language to describe what it is you want it to do. And even if you're not a technical sound designer who's going to be plugging these things in, you still need this language to talk to your developers about what you want to achieve, and you need to be thinking about these things when you're designing the assets, because once again, you're creating this library of sounds for this thing to use. Same, yeah. So the next one, which is slightly harder, is this guy. This is a wooden elevator. So the player comes up to the bottom here, uses this rope pulley system. There's a cantilever over here to basically do this, and then make the elevator move up to the top floor, and then they can traverse and go back down again and up and down. Now the nice thing was this is very similar to our curtain problem. We've got two things that go up and down. And I was like, okay, I'm going to tackle this one first because I've thought about it quite a bit already. So identifying what it needed to do. I ended up doing a single pull stroke and a looping rope gear squeak. So when you grab it, it does a zzz, and then also there's a looping kind of wooden thing that happens in the background that loops and is as long as it needs to be. So if you pull it, you've got that extra, you can deal with different speeds. But I really wanted the character of having that pull stroke on there because that's like an iconic sound. So that was the first thing we put on. It's played when the player pulls the rope. The volume's adjusted by the velocity. So if it's a very small pull, it's next to no sound. The faster you pull it, the louder it is. We stop the rope sound when we let go of it. It's very easy to forget about this stuff and have a looping, quiet sound playing in the background, like forever and ever and ever. And a wood creak. So when you let go of the rope, there's some creaks that happen in the wood to make you feel a bit more like this thing is jimmied together. A wood clunk if the elevator hits the top and the bottom. That's kind of more of a good thing for the user to know. Like if you're not facing the floor, you can get to the top, you get this nice clunk to know the ropes have stopped moving, I'm at the top or the bottom. I'm not going to go into the massive, everything that you do is going to be different. On Wanderer, I didn't have an audio programmer, so I learnt blueprints. We're using native audio as well. We didn't have Fmod or anything. So I was doing this a lot, bumbling through this, and then a proper developer would come in and be like, I see what you're trying to do. I'll fix it for you. That was kind of how that iteration worked. But I'm going to touch very briefly on kind of the thought process behind it. So when you grab a rope, that's what our event grab down is. What we're going to be doing is we're going to start playing that pull sound effect. Pretty straightforward. And then what we're going to do is when we get... I'm confused myself already. Oh, cool. And then also on the event grab up, so when we let go, we're going to play our creak sound. When you let go of it, this is what the creak sound effects are. And we're going to fade out our pull sound. Pretty straightforward so far. Now this pull sound effects, if this is not making any sense to you, that's totally fine. This on pull, while you're moving it, this is updating basically with every movement, so almost on tick, depending on how quickly you're doing it. We're doing a couple of things. We're going, hey, the elevator at the end here, this guy here, the elevator, it's static mesh. How high is it? Z in Unreal is up and down. And then is it close to the top or close to the bottom? That's what these guys are. Yes. What do I want to do if it's close to the top or the bottom? I want to play, where are we? Our clunk sound, and I want to turn off our pull sound so that loop isn't going once you hit the end. And then the other one is if it's not at the top or the bottom, we go to the false. We say, hey, what was the previous lift height? What is the current lift height? How much is that? Is it moving fast? Sorry, is it moving fast or is it moving slow? And then we plug that into the volume of the sound effect. So what the sound cue looks like, pretty boring. Here's the loop. Here's two rope rub sounds. Again, more just sound cue stuff. Here's where they're positioned. Here's our clunk sounds. And here's the, here's the creak sounds. Here's the clunk sounds. Oh, and here's the video. I'm not getting any sound. So yeah, on some of those really quick moves, it kind of didn't get it, one of the ones in there. But again, getting all of that stuff that I wanted it to sound like into that kind of language was a real thought process and something that is really good to start nurturing, even if you're not going to plug it in, to be able to start talking to people in that way and designing your assets in that way. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is our impact audio system. So VR, you can pick a whole bunch of things up. That means you can throw a bunch of things. That means every one of these things needs to make sound. Now what you can see here is a small portion of the amount of things that we had in the game. We tried to make everything that you think you should be able to pick up, pick-upable, which meant I spent weeks and weeks and weeks going around my house going, I need to find this thing, and clunk, 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 and recording it, which I genuinely love doing. And so this system was pretty straightforward as well. I was like, I need at least 3 soft impact sounds. I need at least 3 hard impact sounds. I added more where I felt I could feel the repetitions. If it's a smashing object, at least 5 impact sounds. Velocity, it determines which sound should be played, soft, hard, or obviously smash. And also within those sounds, adjust the levels. Audio attenuation was based on the object, so that's how far away from the object you are, how much you should hear it. And you think, well, that actually varies quite a bit, depending on if I threw a frying pan and if I threw a ping pong ball. Like, one's got a lot more energy and it's going to travel a lot further. One has a lot less energy, is only going to be heard quite close. And then a pitch and volume randomization where appropriate. Anything that's tonal, like a frying pan, for example, pitch is weird because the size of a frying pan doesn't change when you throw it, so you end up with this musical kind of clong, 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 and you're like, no, nope. So where appropriate, using that. I didn't use a lot of volume randomization, but a wee bit. Clamp on how quickly a sound effect can play. Hits are weird in games, and you put something down, you're going to get something like 40 hits from doing that kind of thing, and if it's sliding, oh my gosh. So clamping how many times it can play to get it right. If I could do this again, I would look at adding in rolling and sliding as well. That's something that I really wanted to do, but we kind of didn't have scope for. So we don't, if it slides, it ain't got no sound, it's going to do a hit when you hit the ground, and that's about it. And we did a soft surface thing as well. So our environmental artist was able to go around and tag a different object. So if you threw a frying pan onto a couch, even though the couch isn't soft, it's a static mesh, it doesn't do any deforming, you don't get a loud bong. What we end up doing is I put a filter on the top of it, take a lot of that energy out of the tops, and you end up with more of a thud. It's not perfect, but it's nice. It's a nice thing to have. Again, I'd love to go a bit more deeper in that, but the scope wasn't there. Here's an example of that system. So many sounds, so many sounds. But at the end of the day, these are the kinds of things that give weight to your objects. You know, we're playing with things in VR that don't have weight. As soon as you add this thing where it feels slow to move and it's got these sounds, you start really investing in these things have a solid presence in the world. Implementation takeaways. Design your assets with implementation in mind. This is how you should be thinking about things. You should be thinking about how they're going to be performed way before. And there are a lot of projects where you're sending assets. Well, for me, some of my projects are sending assets over the fence to developers. And you need to be able to say, hey, here's how I intend for this thing to work. Otherwise, they'll just do their best. And then you'll see it in game 2 weeks later and then have to go through this process. No, that's not what I meant, and all that kind of stuff. So learn to think about your assets with implementation in mind. Talk to your designers. They have intentions behind these things. Like they have intentions on what these things should do, the things you're interacting with. Glean that information from them. Don't guess. talk to your devs and your tech artists and your VFX artists. So many of the things, so much of the data that I needed, they already had. When a piece of smoke was coming out for a certain amount of time, that data was buried somewhere in there. And it's accessible, and if I know I can use that, then I can start designing my assets with that in mind. So talk to them. I know that's hard in a remote world, but it really helps. I've said this already, learn to communicate and describe your sound design performance early. Even though I implemented most of my own stuff on Wanderer, as soon as I'd start describing a problem and I sat down and did it clearly, often I understood the solution to it because I'd learned to describe it clearly. And then the other person would be like, what did I do? And I'd be like, you listened, and I was forced to describe it clearly. Learn the tools you have to use. Often audio is kind of just this little quiet section that not a lot of people are thinking about until you put your hand up and you start saying things. So start asking questions and learn what you have available to you. It's different for every game. Iterate, get it in and play with it, because something that seems like a good idea, as much as I'm saying learn to design with it in mind, it's not until you get it in that you know if it's working or not. So be willing to get something in as well, and be okay if it's not great and it's not working. Like, that's part of the process. The more you can do that, the better you're gonna be. Check the value to work ratio. It's really easy to get into simulation mode when you're doing these things and want to simulate like real life audio. But the issue with that is we're finite and we've got a finite amount of resources, and sit there and go, is the value in here? Is me getting this thing working exactly the way it would in real life? Is the value in it, or is close enough okay? And that brings me to my next one. Cheat. Where you can cheat a sound in and make it sound like it's working for 80% of the time, like, that's okay, that's good. We're catering to 80% of the time. Sometimes you can use that extra time you would have got in making things simulate to make other more important things better. But that's up to you. You know, where you see the value. Where is the best value going to be for putting your time? You're never going to be able to make everything exactly 100% how you want it. So just mitigate that stuff and check yourself every now and then and going, am I getting too deep? Am I going too hardcore on this thing? Wonder was kind of cool. If you haven't played it, you should play it. And My Eyes is also hiring. If you like making VR games, go and check these guys out. They got some stuff going. Yeah, that's the whole thing, man. We've got 5 minutes, I think. If anyone has any questions, there's 2 mics on either side in the middle there. I must have explained it so clearly. Sure.
Can everyone hear me? My question is I really liked your advice that you were giving for the process of technical sound designers or sound designers. Do you have any advice from this process in your journey to designers and programmers on how to work with someone like yourself?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I have experience with people who will take the sounds and just literally do what I say without kind of considering, and that's a bit on me, you know what I mean? But we'll literally go, yep, I've done what you said. And then I look at it and I go, well, this is obviously wrong. Like, anybody can tell this is obviously wrong. And don't do that, please. Like, look at a thing and go, this isn't sounding quite right. Oh, they probably mean this. Or ask me, hey, this isn't sounding right. Not just jam it in, flick the card away, and then I listen to it. Audio is something that, you know, it should make sense, hopefully, to everyone when it's working correctly. So if it looks weird and it's not doing what it is, or if there's something unclear about implementation notes, ask. You know what I mean? Like, I know that's lots of people just want to get in and do work and not talk, but it'll save everyone time, and you won't have to come back and do it again later. And that helps me out as well. Yeah, hopefully that answers this. Anything else?
Incredible work on the game, by the way. You can really tell the amount of sound detail going into the game, like just playing with things, and you're like, holy shit, everything is working. Incredible game, by the way, definitely recommend. Did you start off with a huge asset list? Like, did you know approximately how many assets you were going to do, and how many did you end up needing to create?
In terms of sound design itself, we had this panic room. I didn't know one was giving me a list of things. This was our first big game. There wasn't a good pipeline between Art and me and going, hey, here's a sound. I kept trying to ask people, if you put a thing in and it moves, it needs sound, and someone needs to tell me. But often that didn't happen. for various reasons. And so what I'd end up doing is going through a level, playing with a whole bunch of stuff and saying, oh, there's a thing, and I have to scope out basically every level. When it comes to this sort of stuff, I got a list from them because they needed to create grab poses for every single item. So there was already a list there that was available in this room, and I could go through and go, here's all the items in front of me. In terms of how many sounds, I don't know. I could probably work that out at some point. But heaps and heaps. Heaps of sound design and heaps of dialogue.
Thousands?
Yeah. Hopefully that's an answer.
Yeah. Very impressive. Nice work.
Thank you. I'm relatively approachable as well. If you have questions later on, come up and poke me, and I'll probably talk your ear off about anything to do with this. Thank you for your time. Oh, we got one more. We got time. We got 2 minutes.
Yeah, hey, was there a reason why you didn't use an audio middleware program like Fmod or Wise?
I pushed for it. I said it's going to help us a lot if we do this, but it was, I can't remember what it was, I think it was like 15 or 20K for the license and what we were doing. And I don't think the people who were making decisions quite saw the value in it at that point. But as soon as we started dealing with music, I think that became quite apparent. But by the end, the ship was already moving in a direction. It was quite hard to change it. I feel like if we were to do it again, we would probably use Fmod. But in saying that, Metasounds is coming out, so I'm kind of excited to try that. Maybe I was just like punishing myself. I don't know. I'm kind of excited about that. So yeah, I think it was more of a financial and scope thing for us. Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks everybody. Thanks for coming and being a great crowd.